the case of Trayvon Martin, you had an individual who looked at Trayvon Martin, looked at his clothing, looked at his posture, looked at his skin color and gender, and immediately said, he's one of those, right? Typed him immediately, profiled him immediately, put him into a very narrow box and said, this is how we deal with those quote unquote kinds of people. And if he had been able to say, oh, I've seen a kid like that, you know, he's part of my community, he's part of my church, he goes to the local school, he's a nephew, he's a son, it's unfortunate, but
he could have read about somebody like Trayvon in a book.
Yeah. And
I'm sure he hasn't.
There has to be some way to humanize the person. I mean, if we go back to, you know, the days of the anti-slavery campaign in this country, one of the biggest challenges for abolitionists was humanizing the slave. How do you humanize an enslaved person when they've been represented as a brute and a beast and subhuman, and they have no feelings? And, you know, when that's the dominant representation, that justifies enslavement. And so the goal, one of the jobs of the anti-slavery campaign was to humanize the enslaved population so that people could look at them and say, that is a brother, that is a sister, that is a human being who's just like me, who has feelings just like me. And the only way that you can justify brutalization is to say, that person is not like me. Blogged about Trayvon Martin, and there was a part of me that just felt so weary, you know, like, here we go again. Like, how many times am I going to have to talk to a group of students about a young man unarmed being shot down? And then like you said, I'm doing these presentations for the Brooklyn Public Library, and I do poetry workshops. I go into a school for three visits in school in one class for a 40-minute period. I do writing exercises with them. We produce poetry, and then they come to the central branch of the Brooklyn Public Library and present their work. And I was just about to leave for France, and I went into a school in Prospect Heights, and it's a 7th grade class, and it's a pretty small classroom, so the kids are really close together. And they were a great group. I always had a really enthusiastic response from them. But I took in Sharon Flake's poem, You Don't Even Know Me. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that was, the title of her book, which is a collection of short stories about young black men from their perspective. And the speaker of the poem is a young black man, and he has actually 3 or 4 addressees. And so he starts off talking to his teacher, who underestimates him and thinks that he should be satisfied with a C when he knows he's an A student. And then it switches to a neighbor and, you know, someone who doesn't know him. And it says, you know, you see me on TV, handcuffs, you know, coat over my head, being led away by the police. And you think I'm this menace. But, you know, just the other day, I was the kid, you know, your next door neighbor, and you were talking to me and everything was all right. And then as soon as I started hanging out with 3 or 4 of my friends, suddenly, you know, we have a problem, and then I'm someone to be afraid of. And so we read the poem together, and then I asked the students, you know, to identify the addressees and to talk about what it feels like to be misread. You know, what does it feel like to have somebody look at you and not know who you are and to make a very quick judgment? And I found myself talking about Trayvon Martin, and almost as soon as his name came out of my mouth, I thought, you should stop. Because these are not college-age kids. You know, these are 7th graders. They don't know you very well. You don't have a long-standing relationship with them. You kind of, you know, you just come into the school, you do these quick workshops, and it's kind of like a fun break for them, and then you leave. And I said, you know, do you guys know about Trayvon Martin? He was this, and some of them said, yeah, they did. And I said, you know, he was this young boy, not much older than you. And, you know, he was just walking home. He went to the store. I think of all the times you go to the bodega and you go to get something and someone shot him dead. And a couple of the kids snickered. And I don't know if it was in response to what we were saying or if it was anxiety or discomfort, or maybe they were talking about something completely unrelated. And I said, why are you laughing? That's not funny. And then there was kind of like this moment of silence. And I was like, okay, get us back on track, get us back on track. And we moved on with the activity, and they had to make a list of words that described how other people see them, versus words that would describe how they see themselves. And then we used those two lists to write a poem. So I only had 40 minutes. I didn't get to hear any of the poetry that they wrote, but the next week they came to the Central Branch of the Brooklyn Public Library, and they got up on stage, and I asked for volunteers to read Sharon Flake's poem, just to kind of orient the audience. And 3 young black men said they wanted to read it, and they took it so seriously. They went into the back. They said, can we go into the back of the auditorium and practice? And we went over into a corner, and I said, how do you think it feels? How do you think the speaker in the poem feels when all these people, underestimate him or expect bad things from him? And I said, do you know what the word indignant means? And 2 of the boys looked at me like they'd never heard that word before. And one boy turned to me and he said, it has to do with your dignity. And I said, that's absolutely right. It has to do with your dignity. So this speaker feels kind of outraged that, someone would misread him, even though he's this straight-A student and he wants to be an architect and he has all these plans for himself. And even his close friends, he tries to tell them about his dreams and they shoot him down. So when it was their turn to get up on stage, boy, they did a fantastic job reading the poem. And I was so proud of them. And afterwards I said, you guys did a great job. And the tallest boy, Ramel, he said, did you see I'm wearing my hoodie today? And he pulled his hoodie up and he said, in solidarity with Trayvon. And I thought, okay, maybe, I wasn't prepared to have that conversation with them, but somebody had that conversation. Somebody, it got through somehow. And they're aware of it. In a way, I wish I didn't have to talk to a bunch of 12-year-old kids about Trayvon Martin. And when I see the solidarity gestures of wearing hoodies, there's a part of me that has that kind of heart palpitation, like, don't go out there wearing a hoodie, like, don't put yourself in danger.